The merchant appeared at precisely 11:58, materializing from the shadows of Midnight Station, like smoke given form. Adrian Cole barely glanced up from his synthetic whiskey. Another Thursday night drowning in the amber glow of artificial stars beyond the viewport. The station's recycled air tasted of metal and broken dreams, fitting for a diplomatic failure nursing his third drink. "Time is a curious thing," the merchant said, sliding onto the adjacent bar stool with movements too fluid to be entirely human. His coat seemed to absorb light, creating pools of darkness that hurt to look at directly. "Some say it heals all wounds. Others claim it reveals all truths. But you, Adrian Cole, you believe time has forgotten you entirely." Adrian's hand tightened around his glass. "If you're selling something, I'm not interested. If you're here to gloat about the Arcturus conference, the exit's that way." The conference. Even thinking about it made his jaw clench. 6 months had passed since humanity's greatest diplomatic humiliation, when the Galactic Coalition had laughed him out of the chambers. "Humans," Ambassador Kresh had sneered, his crystalline form radiating contempt. "Are merchants and warmongers. Nothing more. You peddle trinkets and violence, calling it culture. The Coalition has no need for your kind beyond basic trade agreements." The merchant reached into his coat, producing a pocket watch that seemed older than space travel itself. Bronze and silver intertwined in patterns that shifted when Adrian wasn't looking directly at them. "I'm not here to sell you anything, Mr. Cole. I'm here to return something that was always meant to be yours." "I don't own any antiques." Adrian drained his whiskey, signaling for another. The bartender, a four-armed centaurian, poured without comment. Midnight Station attracted the dregs of the galaxy, the forgotten and the forsaken. Perfect company for a washed-up diplomat. Ownership is such a limited concept. The merchant placed the watch on the bar between them. Up close, Adrian could see inscriptions in a dozen languages, some human, others alien, and a few that seemed to predate both. "This particular piece has been waiting for you since before you were born. Since before your grandmother fled Earth during the Water Wars. Since before humanity discovered the first jump gate." Despite himself, Adrian found his gaze drawn to the watch. The metal felt warm, almost alive. And when he touched it, a jolt of recognition shot through him. Impossible, but undeniable. "What kind of con are you running?" "No con. Just a simple transaction completed across centuries." The merchant stood, his form already beginning to fade at the edges. "Listen for the midnight voice. Adrian Cole. Your life begins again in 3 minutes." Before Adrian could respond, the merchant was gone, leaving only the lingering scent of ozone and old paper. The watch lay on the bar, its second hand ticking with mechanical precision. Adrian picked it up, surprised by its weight. Real metal, not the synthetic alloys that dominated modern manufacturing. The inscription on the back read, "Time is the fire in which we burn, unless we learn to dance within the flames." "Cryptic nonsense," Adrian muttered, but he pocketed the watch anyway. The Centaurian bartender was already wiping down where the merchant had sat, as if he'd never been there at all. Adrian's quarters were a 15-minute walk through the station's lower rings, past the gambling dens and black market stalls that never closed. Midnight Station never slept, existing in that perpetual twilight between legitimate commerce and criminal enterprise. The Planetary Alliance maintained it as a neutral zone, too useful to shut down, too dangerous to officially acknowledge. His apartment was sparse, functional. A bed, a desk, a window overlooking the cosmic void. The walls held no decorations save a single photograph Adrian, shaking hands with Earth's president after his first successful negotiation. Back when he'd believed in the power of words over weapons, when he'd thought humanity could earn respect through diplomacy rather than force, How naive he'd been. The watch read 11:59. Adrian set it on his nightstand and prepared for bed, trying to ignore the way it seemed to pulse with its own rhythm. Sleep had been elusive since Arcturus, his dreams haunted by mocking laughter and his own fumbling attempts to defend humanity's worth. "We gave the galaxy jazz," he'd argued desperately. "Literature that moves souls, art that captures the infinite. We've shown that diversity of thought leads to innovation." "Pretty words," Ambassador Kresh had replied, "but your actions speak louder. How many wars in your brief history, how many of your own kind have you sold into servitude for profit? No, Mr. Cole, humans are useful tools, nothing more, except your place." The memory burned, made worse by the kernel of truth within the accusation. Humanity's history was far from pristine. But they'd grown, evolved, learned from their mistakes. Didn't that count for something? The watch chimed midnight. Adrian bolted upright as a voice, neither male nor female, but somehow both, emerged from the timepiece. "Your bride lands in 3 minutes." "What?" He grabbed the watch, examining it for speakers, circuitry, anything that could explain the voice. The metal remained stubbornly analog, gears and springs with no trace of modern technology. "Your bride lands in 3 minutes," the voice repeated, patient as time itself. Adrian's mind raced. Bride. He wasn't married, wasn't even dating. The last relationship had ended 2 years ago when Sarah had grown tired of coming second to his career. This had to be some elaborate prank, though he couldn't imagine who would bother. He wasn't important enough anymore to merit such attention. Outside his window, the normal flow of traffic around Midnight Station continued. Freight haulers, personal shuttles, the occasional military patrol. Nothing suggested an imminent arrival, bride or otherwise. 2 minutes, the watch announced. Adrian threw on clothes, grabbing his communicator and security badge out of habit. If someone was playing games, he'd find out who. The docking bays were only an elevator ride away, and his diplomatic credentials still granted him access to arrival manifests. The elevator descended through the station's core, passing levels dedicated to commerce, leisure, and less savory pursuits. Adrian pulled up the docking schedule on his communicator. 3 ships due in the next 10 minutes, a cargo hauler from Proxima, a diplomatic courier from the Vegan Confederacy, and nothing. The third slot showed only static, as if the data had been corrupted or deliberately obscured. 1 minute. The elevator opened onto Docking Bay 7, the smallest of Midnight Station's receiving areas, used primarily for private vessels and sensitive cargo. It was deserted, save for a lone technician running diagnostic checks. Adrian approached the observation window, his breath fogging the reinforced 2 polymer as he peered into the star-flecked darkness. 30 seconds. A ripple in space caught his eye, the telltale distortion of a ship dropping from hyperspace. But the signature was wrong. Unlike any drive technology he'd encountered, the distortion grew, reality bending around a point of impossible brightness. And then, the ship materialized like a dagger thrust through silk, sleek and predatory. Its hull seemed to be carved from a single piece of midnight blue crystal that reflected starlight in ways that hurt to contemplate. Weapon ports lined its flanks, currently sealed, but unmistakably military in purpose. This was a warship, built by a civilization that had perfected the art of elegant violence. "Arrival," the watch announced with what Adrian could have sworn was satisfaction. The ship settled into the docking cradle with surprising grace, its size dwarfing the bay. Adrian recognized the design aesthetic now, warrior caste of the Solivar Empire, a civilization that had turned combat into religion and honor into currency. They rarely ventured into Alliance space, and never without purpose. The technician had fled, probably to alert security. Adrian should have followed. But something kept him rooted in place. The watch had gone silent, but it thrummed against his palm like a living thing. The ship's main hatch opened with a hiss of equalizing pressure. A ramp extended, and figures began to descend. Warriors in ceremonial armor came first, their movements precise despite the elaborate plate and energy weapons. They formed an honor guard, a corridor of steel and discipline. And then she appeared. Lady Sarai Vorkani stepped from her ship like a force of nature given feminine form. Where her guards were all sharp angles and barely contained violence, she moved with a dancer's grace that somehow made her seem more dangerous, not less. Her armor was ceremonial rather than practical. Deep purple shot through with silver constellations that mapped battles won and enemies conquered. Her skin held the faint blue tinge common to her people, marking her as pure-blooded Solovar nobility. But it was her eyes that captured Adrian's attention. Golden, like Earth's old sun. They swept the docking bay with intelligence that missed nothing. When they landed on him, standing frozen at the observation window, her lips curved in what might have been amusement or challenge. She raised one hand, a gesture that somehow commanded attention across the distance and through reinforced polymer. When she spoke, her voice carried despite the barrier, projected by technology or sheer force of will. Adrian Cole, by the ancient rites and the prophecy of the timekeepers, I name you as my intended. Come forth and face your destiny. The watch chimed once more, a sound like cosmic laughter. Your bride has arrived. Adrian's mind struggled to process what was happening. Prophecy intended. The Solovar practiced arranged marriages. He knew. Political tools to cement alliances and end wars. But they'd never included humans in such arrangements. Their culture was built on strength, honor, and martial prowess. Everything humanity had been mocked for lacking. Security forces were flooding the bay now. Station personnel in riot gear forming a barrier between the Solovar delegation and the rest of the station. Commander Walsh, head of security, was already on his communicator, probably alerting the Planetary Alliance to a potential diplomatic incident. Adrian's own communicator buzzed. Walsh's voice crackled through, Cole, what the hell did you do? I have no idea, Adrian said honestly. Well, they're asking for you by name. The lady claims you're her fiancé. Please tell me this is some cultural misunderstanding. Adrian looked at the watch, its face now showing symbols he didn't recognize instead of numbers. I think I need to go down there. Are you insane? We don't know what they want. They want me, apparently. Adrian was already moving toward the access stairs. And if I don't go, this becomes an incident. The Solovar don't make social calls. Commander, if they're here, it's for a reason. Cole, wait for backup at least. Adrian cut the connection. His diplomatic instincts, rusty from months of disuse, were screaming at him. The Solovar valued directness, courage in the face of uncertainty. Hiding behind security would be seen as cowardice, confirming every negative stereotype about humanity. The access stairs deposited him on the bay floor, just as a tense standoff was developing. Station security had weapons drawn, but not aimed, while the Solovar warriors stood in perfect formation, hands resting on sword hilts with practiced ease. One wrong move would turn the docking bay into a slaughterhouse. Adrian stepped between the two groups, hands raised in what he hoped was a universal gesture of peaceful intent. I'm Adrian Cole. You asked for me. Lady Sarai studied him with those golden eyes, taking in his rumpled clothes, the day's worth of stubble, the lingering smell of whiskey. If she found him wanting, her expression didn't show it. You carry the timekeeper's gift. Adrian pulled out the watch, which seemed to glow faintly in the bay's harsh lighting. This a merchant gave it to me an hour ago. Not gave. Returned. Sarai descended the ramp with deliberate steps, her guard moving to maintain formation around her. Up close, Adrian could see she was younger than he'd first thought. Perhaps his own age. though the Solovar aged differently than humans. That watch has been waiting for you since the Covenant of Hours was first spoken. I don't understand any of this, Adrian said. Covenant timekeeper. And what's this about? Marriage. A ripple of something passed through the Solovar warriors. Amusement offense. Adrian couldn't read their body language well enough to tell. Sarai stopped just outside arm's reach, close enough that Adrian could see the intricate scarification on her neck that marked her victories. You truly don't know. Your ignorance of your own heritage is almost charming. She tilted her head, studying him like a particularly interesting puzzle. Very well. I will educate you, as is a bride's duty. Now wait just a minute. The Covenant of Hours was established 3 centuries ago, when your people first stumbled into the void. Sarai began to circle him, a predator evaluating prey. A human explorer, Marcus Trent, saved the life of warlord Cain the Elder. As reward, he was offered a boon. Gold. He refused. Territory he had no interest. Instead, he asked for time. Adrian turned to keep her in sight, acutely aware of how the Solovar warriors had subtly shifted position to surround him. Time for what? Time for humanity to prove itself worthy of respect. The warlord granted his request, but with conditions. When the appointed hour came, marked by the timekeeper's watch, a union would be forged. Human cleverness joined with Solovar strength, your blood and ours, creating something new. And you think I'm what Marcus Trent's descendant? I know you are. Sarai stopped directly in front of him, close enough that he could feel the heat radiating from her armor's power source. Just as I know the watch called to you tonight, after lying dormant for decades, the time of proving has ended. Adrian Cole, now comes the time of choosing. Commander Walsh's voice crackled over the bay's communication system. Lady Sarai, I'm going to need to see some documentation before anyone goes anywhere. This is still Alliance space, and we have procedures. Sarai's hand moved to her sword hilt, not quite drawing, but making her intent clear. I recognize no authority here save the Covenant. The human is mine by right of prophecy and blood debt. Any who stand between us will answer to Solovar law. The tension in the bay ratcheted up another notch. Adrian could see fingers tightening on triggers, warriors adjusting their stances for combat. One wrong word would turn this into a massacre, and station security would lose. Badly. Stand down, Adrian called out, surprising himself with the authority in his voice. Commander Walsh, order your people to lower their weapons. Cole, have you lost your mind? This is a diplomatic matter now. Adrian straightened, falling back on training that had been useless at Arcturus, but might save lives here. Lady Sarai is here under terms of an existing treaty. Apparently, we need to resolve this through dialogue, not weapons. He turned to Sarai, switching to formal Solovar, a language he'd studied, but never had occasion to use. Your presence honors this humble station, Lady of Battles, but surely even prophecy allows for discussion. Your people value the clash of words as much as the clash of blades. Surprise flickered across Sarai's features. Few humans bothered to learn Solovar. Fewer still could speak it without mangling the tonal qualities. You have studied our ways. I was a diplomat. It was my job to understand, even if understanding wasn't enough. The bitterness crept into his voice despite his efforts. The failed peace speaker of Arcturus. Recognition dawned in her eyes. You tried to win with words what your people could not claim through strength. A fool's errand, but perhaps a noble one. Is that why I was chosen to be mocked by another civilization for humanity's shortcomings? Sarai laughed, a sound like crystal chimes in a hurricane. Mocked. Oh, Adrian Cole, you understand so little. You were not chosen for your failures. You were chosen for what you might become, if you have the courage to grasp it. She sheathed her sword with a decisive motion, and the tension in the bay decreased fractionally. But you are right. Discussion has merit, and I would not start our courtship with blood. Where may we speak privately? Courtship. The word sent a chill down Adrian's spine. This was really happening. Somehow. A pocket watch and a promise made centuries ago had upended his life in the span of an hour. The station has diplomatic quarters, he offered. Neutral ground. Acceptable. Sarai gestured to her guards, who formed up with military precision. Lead the way, my intended. We have much to discuss before the sun rises on our new future. As Adrian led the Solovar delegation through Midnight Station's corridors, the watch pulsed against his chest like a second heartbeat. Citizens and visitors alike pressed against walls to let them pass, eyes wide with a mixture of fear and fascination. Word would spread quickly: a human and a Solovar noble, bound by ancient prophecy. He caught sight of his reflection in a darkened window and almost laughed. 12 hours ago, he'd been a washed-up diplomat drinking himself toward obscurity. Now he was apparently engaged to alien royalty and at the center of a 300-year-old conspiracy. The watch chimed softly, and for just a moment, Adrian could have sworn he heard it whisper, "Your story is just beginning." The diplomatic quarters occupied the station's middle tier, a series of modular suites designed to accommodate various species' environmental needs. Adrian led them to the human standard section, grateful that the Solovar could breathe the same atmosphere without difficulty. The main conference room was austere but functional, with a long table and strategic lighting that had hosted countless negotiations over the years. Sarai dismissed all but 2 of her guards, stationing them at the door. She removed her ceremonial helmet, revealing hair the color of star-drunk midnight, woven into complex braids that probably told their own stories of lineage and accomplishment. Without the armor's bulk, she seemed smaller, but no less dangerous, like a blade freed from its sheath. "So," Adrian said, settling into a chair across from her, "explain to me why I should believe any of this. Ancient covenants, prophecies, magical watches that announce arriving brides. It sounds like something from a bad holodrama." "Your skepticism is understandable but irrelevant." Sarai poured herself water from the provided pitcher, her movements economical and precise. "Belief does not change truth. The watch recognized you. It spoke. I am here. These are facts, not faith." Adrian pulled out the watch, setting it on the table between them. In the room's neutral lighting, it looked almost ordinary, just an antique timepiece with unusual markings. "Let's say I accept the facts. What exactly do you want from me? What does this arrangement entail?" "Marriage, obviously." Sarai said it like she was discussing the weather. "A joining of bloodlines as prescribed by the covenant. Your genetic material combined with mine to produce offspring that will bridge our species. Just like that, no courtship, no getting to know each other, straight to breeding." Her eyes flashed dangerously. "Do not mistake necessity for barbarism. Adrian Cole, the Solovar do not treat marriage lightly. Yes, the covenant demands union. But how that union unfolds, that remains to be written." She leaned forward, and Adrian caught a scent like ozone and something floral he couldn't identify. "Tell me, diplomat, what do you know of my people beyond your dusty studies? You value strength above all else. Your entire society is structured around warrior castes and combat trials. Politics are settled through ritualized duels. You've been spacefaring for 1,000 years and have never lost a war. Surface truths." Sarai's expression suggested he'd failed some test. "What of our poetry, our music that can reduce grown warriors to tears, the decade-long courtship rituals where lovers prove their worth through art as much as combat? You see the blade but miss the hand that wields it." Adrian felt properly chastised. He had studied the Solovar, but only as potential adversaries or allies, reducing them to strategic assessments and cultural bullet points. "You're right. I apologize." Better. She sat back, somehow making the simple chair seem like a throne. Now I will tell you truths your databases lack. The Solivar are dying. The words hung in the air like a physical presence. Adrian straightened, his diplomatic instincts finally engaging fully. Dying how disease wore. Stagnation. The admission clearly cost her. We have perfected the art of war until there are no more victories to claim. Our bloodlines have become so refined, so specialized, that genetic diversity is failing. Children are fewer each generation. Those born often lack the fire that once defined us. Understanding dawned. The covenant wasn't just about honoring a debt. Your ancestors saw an opportunity. Warlord Caney was many things, but never a fool. Sarai's smile held edges sharp enough to cut. Your species is chaos incarnate. You adapt, evolve, overcome through sheer stubborn refusal to accept limitation. In 3 centuries, you've gone from one world to hundreds. Your genetic diversity is enviable. So I'm what breeding stock. You are hope. The words came out harder than she probably intended. The watch choosing you means you carry the necessary genetic markers. Yes. But more than that, you were willing to stand before the coalition and argue for humanity's worth, despite knowing you would fail. That kind of courage. It has been too long since I've seen it among my own kind. Adrian processed this, his mind racing through implications. A dying warrior race, seeking renewal through human genetic diversity. It was almost poetic, in a deeply disturbing way. What about your own people? Surely there must be opposition to mixing bloodlines with inferior humans. Oh, there is. Sarai's hand drifted to her sword hilt, an unconscious gesture that spoke volumes. The Purity faction believes we should face extinction with honor, rather than dilute our essence. They will try to kill you, of course. Probably me as well, once they learn I've accepted the Covenant's terms. Wonderful. Any other surprises? Ritual combat tests of worthiness. Do I have to slay a dragon to prove my valor? Dragons are extinct. We killed the last one centuries ago. She said it with such matter-of-fact sadness that Adrian couldn't tell if she was joking. But yes, there will be trials. The marriage cannot proceed without approval from the War Council. You will need to prove that human cleverness can match Solivar's strength. And if I refuse, if I say thanks, but no thanks to this whole insane arrangement? Sarai studied him for a long moment. Then you condemn both our species to slower deaths. Humanity will remain isolated, mocked, relegated to the galaxy's margins. The Solivar will fade into history, too proud to bend, too rigid to evolve. The Watch chose this moment, Adrian Cole, because this is when choice still matters. She stood abruptly, her guards snapping to attention. But I will not force you. The Covenant speaks of willing union, or none at all. You have until the 3rd sunrise to decide. I will remain on station, learning what I can of your people. 3 days to decide whether to marry an alien warrior princess and potentially save 2 civilizations? That seems a bit rushed. Time is the one luxury neither of us possesses. She moved toward the door, then paused. A question, before I go. At Arcturus, when they laughed at you, what did you feel? Adrian's jaw tightened at the memory. Rage, humiliation, a desire to prove them wrong that burned so hot I thought it might consume me. Good. Her smile was fierce and approving. That fire, that is what the Solivar have lost. That is what our children need. Think on that. Adrian Cole. She left with her guards, their footsteps echoing through the corridor like war drums. Adrian sat alone in the conference room, staring at the watch. It had resumed showing normal time, as if the last hour had been just another ordinary span of minutes. His communicator buzzed. Commander Walsh, no doubt wanting explanations Adrian didn't have. He ignored it, pouring himself water with hands that barely trembled. 3 days to decide the fate of civilizations. 3 days to accept or reject a marriage arranged before his great-grandmother was born. 3 days to prove that humanity's worth lay not in strength or conquest, but in the choice to transform conflict into cooperation. The watch ticked on, counting seconds toward a future that suddenly seemed both terrible and full of possibility. Adrian picked it up, feeling its weight, its warmth, its patient mechanical heart. "What have you gotten me into?" he asked it. The watch, for once, remained silent. But Adrian could have sworn he felt it pulse with something like anticipation, as if it too was eager to see what choices the next 3 sunrises would bring. The first sunrise came too quickly. Adrian hadn't slept, spending the night researching everything he could find about the Solovar and the mysterious Covenant of Hours. The station's databases were frustratingly sparse on details, offering only the standard diplomatic briefings and cultural overviews he'd already memorized years ago. What he did find was buried in the personal logs of early human explorers, fragmentary accounts that mentioned the timekeepers in passing, references to a sect within Solovar society that claimed to see possible futures, guiding their people through crucial decision points. Most xenoanthropologists dismissed them as myth, but Adrian was starting to reconsider what was myth and what was simply truth dressed in legend. The watch hadn't spoken again, but it had done something arguably worse. Every hour, on the hour, it showed him visions, brief flashes of possible futures that left him reeling. In one, he saw himself in Solovar armor, standing beside Sarai as they addressed a united council of species. In another, Midnight Station burned while human and Solovar ships tore each other apart. The visions felt real enough to taste, real enough to fear. "You look terrible," Commander Walsh said, sliding into the seat across from Adrian in the station's main cafeteria. The morning crowd was thin, mostly night shift workers grabbing breakfast before bed. "Thanks. That's exactly what I needed to hear." Adrian nursed his coffee, his 3rd cup since dawn. The synthetic caffeine was doing nothing for his exhaustion, but at least gave his hands something to do. Walsh studied him with the calculating gaze of a career security officer. "Want to tell me what's really going on? Because the official story Lady Sarai filed says you're engaged by ancient treaty, which sounds like the kind of thing that starts wars, not prevents them. It's complicated. It always is with you diplomats." Walsh leaned back, her cybernetic eye whirring as it focused. She'd lost the original in a pirate raid years ago, back when Midnight Station was even rougher than it was now. "But here's what's not complicated. I've got 3 more Solovar ships requesting docking permission. Different factions, based on their identification codes, and a Planetary Alliance cruiser that's just passing by, but has powered up its weapon systems." Adrian's stomach dropped. 3 days. She said I had 3 days to decide. Yeah. Well, apparently not everyone got that memo. Walsh pulled up a holographic display from her wrist unit. "The Purity faction ship arrived 2 hours ago. They're demanding you be turned over for violation of sacred bloodlines. The other 2 are treaty keepers, here to ensure the covenant is honored. Whatever you've gotten yourself into, Cole, it's bigger than just you and the princess." Princess? The word sat strangely in Adrian's mind. Sarai was many things, but the fairy tale term seemed inadequate for a woman who could probably kill him 17 different ways with her bare hands. "Any advice?" Adrian asked. "Run. Fast and far." Walsh's expression softened slightly. "But you won't, will you? You've got that look. Same one you had before Arcturus. Like you think you can fix everything with the right words and enough determination."
"It didn't work last time."
"No, but that didn't stop you from trying." She stood, the hologram disappearing. "Lady Sarai has requested a cultural exchange. She wants to understand human customs regarding courtship. I'm assigning you as her liaison." "Walsh." "It's not a request. Cole. Either you're her fiancé, in which case this is appropriate, or you're not, in which case we need to maintain the diplomatic fiction until those warships decide what they're doing. She paused at the cafeteria exit. Try not to start an interstellar incident. I've got enough paperwork as it is. Adrian found Sarai in the station's observation deck, the massive transparent aluminum dome that offered a 360-degree view of space. She stood with her back to him, hands clasped behind her, watching the dance of vessels around the station. She'd traded her ceremonial armor for a more practical combat suit that still managed to make her look lethal. Your security chief is efficient, she said without turning. I asked for you 20 minutes ago. I was researching. Adrian moved to stand beside her, maintaining a careful distance. The timekeepers, the visions. You didn't mention the watch would show me possible futures.
I didn't know it would. The timekeeper's gifts are unpredictable.
She glanced at him, golden eyes unreadable.
What have you seen?
War, peace, death, life, 1,000 variations on what might be. He pulled out the watch, its face currently showing normal time. Is any of it real? All of it. None of it. Sarai turned to face him fully. The future exists in probability waves until choices collapse them into reality. The watch shows you the most likely outcomes based on current patterns. Change the patterns. Change the future. Quantum prophecy. Wonderful. Adrian pocketed the watch again. Your Purity faction friends have arrived. They are not my friends. The words came out sharp enough to cut steel. They represent everything that's killing my people. Rigid thinking, rejection of change, the belief that death with honor is preferable to life with adaptation.
And yet they're here.
Because the covenant is sacred law. Even they cannot simply ignore it. She moved to a different viewing angle, watching a sleek Solovar destroyer hold position just outside the station's defense perimeter. They will try to provoke you into something they can interpret as cowardice or unworthiness. Then, they can claim the covenant is void. What constitutes unworthiness in Solovar culture? Fleeing from challenge, choosing safety over justice, valuing personal comfort over collective need. She smiled thinly. All things humans are famous for, according to our propaganda. We prefer to call it pragmatism.
Is that what you called it at Arcturus, when you stood before beings who could have vaporized you with a thought and demanded recognition for your species?
She shook her head.
That wasn't pragmatism. Adrian Cole. That was the kind of glorious stupidity my people used to value.
Before Adrian could respond, alarms began wailing through the station. Emergency lights bathed the observation deck in red, and Walsh's voice echoed from the communication system. Security alert. Unauthorized personnel in Docking Bay 12. All civilians remain in place. Sarai was already moving, her hand on her sword. The Purity faction. They're making their move early. Wait. Adrian caught her arm, surprised by the solid muscle beneath the combat suit. You can't just charge in there. This is still Alliance territory.
And those are my people violating it.
She shook off his grip but didn't immediately rush away. If I don't respond, they'll see weakness. If your security forces have to subdue them, it becomes an interstellar incident. Adrian's mind raced through possibilities, his diplomatic training finally finding purchase. What if we turned this into an opportunity? Explain, quickly. The Purity faction expects you to meet violence with violence. They expect me to hide behind station security. What if we deny them both? He was already moving toward the lift, Sarai keeping pace. You said Solovar politics can be settled through ritualized duels. Does that extend to matters of honor?
In theory. But you're not Solovar. They won't recognize your right to...
She stopped mid-sentence, understanding flickering across her features.
Unless you're defending the honor of your intended bride.
Exactly. They can't provoke an incident if I meet their challenge directly. And if I win, They have to acknowledge the Covenant's validity. Sarai's smile was sharp and appreciative. You're asking to face warriors who've trained since birth. The odds.
I've been dealing with bad odds my whole career. The lift descended rapidly toward the docking levels. Besides, I don't have to win. I just have to not lose in a way that brings dishonor.
They emerged into chaos. Docking Bay 12 was a standoff waiting to explode. 5 Solivar warriors in traditional battle dress faced off against a dozen station security officers. The warriors hadn't drawn weapons yet, but their stance suggested violence was moments away. At their head stood General Varrock Thekprin, a mountain of scarred muscle and barely contained rage. His presence dominated the bay like a black hole dominated space, drawing everything toward inevitable destruction. Finally, he growled as Sarai appeared. The failed dynasty shows itself. Come to watch your pet human cower behind alien guns? I've come to witness justice, Sarai replied coolly. Though I doubt you remember what that looks like. Adrian stepped forward before Vera could respond, placing himself between the two groups. The general's eyes fixed on him with predatory interest. You must be Adrian Cole. Varrock's basic was accented, but clear. The watch-chosen mate. You're smaller than I expected.
And you're exactly as diplomatic as I expected. Adrian kept his voice steady despite the way his heart hammered against his ribs. Which is to say, not at all. A ripple of something passed through the soul of our warriors. Surprise amusement, Adrian pressed on before he could lose his nerve. I understand you have concerns about the Covenant. Valid concerns. Even your bloodlines are sacred. Your traditions matter. He switched to formal Solivar, noting the way Varrock's eyes widened slightly. But if you sought understanding, you would have requested an audience. Instead, you bring warriors and threats. This tells me you seek not justice, but blood.
Clever words from a clever ape, Varrock snarled. Your kind always has words, but strength, courage. These you lack. Then test me. The words were out before Adrian could think better of them. Trial by combat, as your laws allow. If I prove unworthy, I'll renounce any claim under the Covenant. When I prove otherwise, you and your faction will acknowledge its validity. The bay fell silent, except for the hum of ventilation systems. Even the station security officers seemed to hold their breath. Varrock's face cycled through emotions, surprise, calculation, and finally, a savage grin.
You challenge me. You have no idea what you're...
Not you. Adrian forced confidence he didn't feel into his voice. I'm not stupid enough to face a general with centuries of experience. I challenge your youngest warrior. Let them prove the superiority of Solivar blood against human determination. It was a calculated insult wrapped in reasonable terms. Refusing would suggest Varrock feared even his weakest might fall to a human. Accepting meant risking humiliation if Adrian somehow won. Varrock's grin widened. Thale, step forward. The warrior who emerged from the group was young by Solivar standards, which still meant he had probably been training longer than Adrian had been alive. Thale stood a full head taller than Adrian, his blue-tinged skin marked with the ritual scars of completed training, but few real battles. First blood or submission, Varrock declared. No energy weapons, no augmentations. Blade and body only. Adrian's mouth went dry. He'd had basic combat training like all diplomatic corps personnel, but that was defense against pirates and criminals, not dueling alien warriors. Still, backing down now would confirm every prejudice about human cowardice. Agreed, he said. Sarai stepped close, her voice low and urgent. You don't have to do this. There are other ways. No, there aren't. Adrian met her golden eyes. Your whole culture respects strength and courage. If I hide now, the Covenant means nothing. I'll just be the coward who got lucky with a magic watch. Something shifted in her expression. Thale favors overhead strikes.
He's young, eager to prove himself. Use that." She pressed something into his hand, a knife. Shorter than a sword, but perfectly balanced. For luck. The center of the bay was cleared, creating an impromptu arena. Adrian tested the knife's weight, trying to remember everything he'd learned about bladed combat. It wasn't much. Thala drew his own blade, a curved sword that sang as it cut the air. His movements were economical, trained, perfect. Everything Adrian wasn't. "Begin," Varrock commanded. Thala moved like lightning. The overhead strike Sarai had warned about coming faster than thought. Adrian threw himself sideways, feeling the blade part the air where his head had been. He rolled, came up, barely got his knife up in time to deflect a follow-up slash. The impact jarred his entire arm. Thala was strong, stronger than any human Adrian had faced in training. But he was also young, eager, pressing his advantage without thought for defense. Adrian gave ground, letting Thala chase him around the makeshift arena. Let him get confident, cocky. The watching Solovar began to mutter, some laughing at the human's apparent cowardice. Even some of the security officers looked uncomfortable. "Fight me!" Thale snarled, frustration creeping into his perfect form. "Stop running like prey!" "I am fighting," Adrian gasped between dodges. "Just not the way you expected." The watch in his pocket pulsed, and suddenly, Adrian saw it, a flash of probability. Thala overextending on his next strike. Without thinking, Adrian dropped to one knee as the sword whistled overhead, then surged up inside Thala's guard. His knife found the gap in Thala's armor at the shoulder, drawing a line of pale blue blood. First blood. The match was over. The bay erupted. Some Solovar roared in outrage, others in approval. Thala stared at the blood on his shoulder with something like shock. He'd been beaten by a human, using tactics no Solovar warrior would employ: evasion, patience, and exploiting an opponent's assumptions. "Trickery," Varrock spat. "Deception and cowardice." "Strategy and adaptation." Sarai's voice cut through the noise like a blade. "The very qualities the Covenant sought to bring to our bloodlines. Or have you forgotten why we're dying?" "Varrock." The general's face darkened. "This proves nothing. One lucky strike." "Proves everything." A new voice echoed through the bay, and everyone turned to see who had spoken. The figure who entered was ancient even by Solovar standards, moving with the careful precision of someone holding tremendous power in check. Her armor was different from the others, marked with symbols that seemed to shift and change when viewed directly. "Keeper Alara," Sarai breathed. "I didn't know you were—" The watch spoke. "I came." The elderly Solovar approached Adrian, her eyes holding depths that made him think of black holes and quantum uncertainties. "You carry Marcus Trent's blood truly. I can see it in the probability streams around you." She turned to address the entire bay. "The Covenant stands. The human has proven worthy by the oldest law of victory, through adaptation. Any who challenge this face not just him, but the timekeepers themselves." Varrock looked like he wanted to argue, but even he wouldn't openly defy a keeper. "This isn't over," he said finally. "The Council will hear of this." "I'm counting on it," Adrian said, finding his voice again. "Tell them humanity stands ready to honor the Covenant. Tell them we offer not just genetic diversity, but new ways of thinking, new approaches to old problems. Tell them—" He paused, meeting Varrock's glare steadily. "Tell them the age of isolation is ending, whether they're ready or not." Varrock left with his warriors, their departure more subdued than their arrival. The station security began to disperse, though Walsh gave Adrian a look that promised a very long debriefing later. Keeper Alara approached Adrian, studying the watch he still held. "You saw the probability. That's why you moved when you did." It wasn't a question, but Adrian nodded anyway. "A flash, just enough to know when to act." "The gift awakens differently in each bearer." Marcus saw distant futures, decades ahead. You see moments, heartbeats of possibility. She smiled, an expression that transformed her ancient features. Perhaps that's what these times need. Not grand prophecy, but moment-to-moment choice. She turned to Sarai. Guard him well. The Purity faction will not accept this easily. The next challenge won't be so straightforward. With that warning, she departed, leaving Adrian and Sarai alone in the bay. Adrian's hands were shaking now that the adrenaline was fading, and his shoulder ached where he'd rolled across the deck plating. That was incredibly stupid, Sarai said. Yes. Brave but stupid. Story of my life. Adrian managed a weak smile. Did I at least earn some respect? From me. You had that when you switched to formal Solivar in front of Varrock. She retrieved her knife, noting the blood on its edge with approval. From my people that remains to be seen. But you've given us something to work with. They walked back toward the lift together. Adrian could feel the watch pulsing in his pocket, showing him fragments of futures where he and Sarai stood together before councils and crowds, where their children bridged two species, where peace was built on understanding rather than strength alone, but also futures where everything burned, where the wrong choice led to war and extinction. 2 more sunrises, he said quietly. 2 more sunrises, she agreed. Think you'll survive them? Adrian thought about Varrock's parting threat, about the political complexities ahead, about the sheer impossibility of what the Covenant demanded. Then, he thought about the alternative humanity forever on the margins. The Solivar fading into history, both species diminished by their inability to change. One way to find out, he said. The watch chimed midnight, though it was barely past noon station time. When Adrian pulled it out, the face showed not hours, but star charts, coordinates that meant nothing to him, but made Sarai inhale sharply. Those are the coordinates for the treaty world, she said. Where the Covenant was first signed. Is that where we're supposed to go? Eventually, if you accept, if we survive. She was quiet for a moment. Adrian, what you did today, it wasn't just about the duel. You understood something most humans in Solivar miss. This isn't about strength versus cleverness, tradition versus innovation. It's about synthesis, creating something new from the best of both. Is that your way of saying you approve of your arranged fiancé? Her laugh was surprising, rich, and genuine. I'm saying you're not what I expected when the Keepers told me about the Covenant. I thought I'd find another human diplomat, all smooth words and hidden agendas. Instead, I find someone willing to face warriors with nothing but determination and a borrowed knife. Don't forget the magic time-telling watch. How could I forget that? She sobered. The next sunrise will bring the War Council's representatives. They'll want more than blood sport. They'll want to see if you can think like a leader, plan like a strategist, different challenges. And the third sunrise. That's when you choose. Accept the Covenant fully, with all it entails, or walk away. She met his eyes. No one will blame you if you refuse. This is a heavy burden for someone who didn't ask for it. Adrian thought about his life before the watch, the failed negotiation, the mockery, the sense that humanity would always be outsiders looking in. Then he thought about what he'd felt facing Thale terror. Yes, but also purpose. For the first time since Arcturus, he'd acted instead of just reacting. I need to prepare for tomorrow, he said. Will you help me? I know the basics of Solivar culture, but if I'm going to face your war council, I'll help. Something warm entered her expression. On one condition, you teach me something human in exchange. Your security chief mentioned courtship customs. I find myself curious about how your people approach such things when prophecy isn't involved. Despite everything, Adrian felt himself smile. Deal. Though I should warn you, human courtship is messy, inefficient, and often ends badly. Perfect, Sarai smiled back. It sounds like exactly what my people need to learn.
As they entered the lift, the watch showed normal time again. But Adrian could feel it waiting, patient as entropy, counting down to choices that would reshape two civilizations. Two sunrises left to prove humanity's worth. Two sunrises to decide if he could accept a marriage arranged before his birth to save species he was only beginning to understand. The lift rose toward uncertain futures, carrying a failed diplomat and a warrior princess who might, together, forge something neither human nor Solivar, but somehow both. The watch ticked on, marking moments of possibility, waiting for choices to collapse probability into destiny. Outside, ships circled Midnight Station like predators scenting blood, but also like protectors. Adrian realized. Some came to challenge the Covenant, others to defend it. The galaxy itself held its breath, waiting to see if two species could overcome their natures and create something new. Two sunrises, two chances, two hearts beginning to beat in something approaching sync. The future remained unwritten, but for the first time in months, Adrian Cole was eager to help write it. The second sunrise brought ships. Adrian watched from Sarai's quarters as vessel after vessel dropped from hyperspace, each representing a different faction of Solivar society. War cruisers bristling with weapons, diplomatic yachts gleaming with ceremonial shields, and strangest of all, a ship that seemed to exist partially outside normal space, its hull flickering between states of being. Timekeepers, Sarai explained, following his gaze. Their ships exist in quantum superposition until they need to act. It's said they can see all possible locations simultaneously. Comforting. Adrian turned from the window, noting how Sarai's quarters reflected her dual nature. Weapons lined one wall in precise military formation, while the opposite held what could only be described as art crystalline structures that sang faintly when the air moved, capturing moments of beauty in solid form. She noticed his observation. "You're surprised." "I'm learning not to be." He moved closer to examine one of the sculptures, a piece that seemed to show a battle transforming into a dance. "You made these long ago, before duty consumed everything." A shadow crossed her features. "The War Council will arrive within the hour. Are you ready?" Adrian touched the watch in his pocket, feeling its steady pulse. Since the duel with Thale, it had been showing him more frequent visions, fragments of possibility that came and went like quantum ghosts. In some, he stood triumphant before the council. In others, he failed so spectacularly that war erupted within minutes. "Define ready," he said. "I've studied every precedent, every law and tradition you've shared. But somehow, I don't think this will be decided by legal arguments." "No, it won't." Sarai moved to her armor stand, running her fingers along the ceremonial breastplate. "The War Council respects results. Show them how humanity's approach can solve Solivar problems, and they'll listen. Fail." She didn't need to finish. A chime announced Commander Walsh at the door. The security chief entered with an expression that managed to combine exhaustion, exasperation, and grudging respect. "The Planetary Alliance just sent an official inquiry," she announced. "They want to know why half the Solivar fleet is parked on our doorstep. I told them it was a cultural exchange program. They didn't believe me." "How much do they know?" Adrian asked. "Enough to be nervous. Not enough to do anything about it." Walsh's cybernetic eye focused on him with mechanical precision. "Cole, whatever you're planning for this council meeting, it better be spectacular. We've got news crews from 17 different species in the public gallery. This has gone from private arrangement to galactic theater." Adrian felt his stomach drop. "News crews. Someone leaked the story. Human diplomat claims ancient alien bride. The headlines write themselves." Walsh pulled up a holographic display showing various news feeds. Most were skeptical, some mocking, but all were watching. "The Purity faction," Sarai said with disgust. They're trying to force a public failure. If Adrian stumbles before a galactic audience, humanity becomes a laughingstock. Again. Adrian stared at the feeds, seeing his own face from the Arcturus debacle being recycled with new, crueler captions. They're using my past failure as proof. This is all some delusion.
Is it?
Walsh asked quietly.
Cole, I've known you for 3 years. You're many things, but delusional isn't one of them. So tell me straight, is this real?
Adrian pulled out the watch, letting its weight settle in his palm. As if responding to his touch, it flickered through several display star charts, probability curves, and finally words in an ancient human language he somehow understood. Choose the impossible. It's real, he said. As real as quantum mechanics and just as strange. Walsh studied him for a long moment, then nodded. All right, then let's give them a show they won't forget. I've cleared Conference Hall 1. It's the biggest space we have, and I've had my people set up full security. Whatever happens, it'll be safe and very, very public. After she left, Sarai helped Adrian into clothing she'd procured, not Solivar armor, which he hadn't earned the right to wear, but a hybrid design that acknowledged both cultures. The base was a human diplomatic suit, but reinforced with Solivar defensive weaving and marked with symbols of provisional alliance.
You look like someone caught between worlds,
she observed. Accurate. Adrian adjusted the collar, which felt both familiar and alien. That's what this whole thing is about. Isn't it finding a space between worlds where something new can grow? She stepped closer, close enough that he could see the faint patterns in her blue-tinged skin, like star maps drawn in flesh.
Adrian, there's something you should know before we face the Council. The visions the Watch shows, they're not just possibilities. They're probabilities weighted by intention. The more you want a particular future, the more likely you are to see it.
Meaning, be careful what you wish for. Her hand touched his briefly, a gesture that sent electricity through his entire arm. The watch responds to deep desire, not surface thoughts. It will show you what your heart wants, not always what your mind thinks it needs. Before Adrian could process that warning, his communicator buzzed. The War Council had arrived. Conference Hall 1 had been transformed into something between a courtroom and an arena. Tiers of seating rose on all sides, packed with representatives from dozens of species. The news crews Walsh had mentioned were stationed at strategic points, their cameras creating a web of observation that would broadcast whatever happened to billions of beings across known space. At the center, 5 figures sat in judgment. The War Council of the Solivar, each a legend in their own right, each representing a different aspect of their warrior culture. General Thren, the Unbroken, who had never lost a battle. Scholar warrior Melex, who wrote poetry between campaigns. The twins, Kara and Sela, who fought as one mind in 2 bodies. And at their center, War Master Doran, old enough to have known Kaney the Elder personally. Adrian and Sarai entered together, the crowd's murmur rising like a tide. He could pick out individual comments in a dozen languages, most skeptical, some openly mocking. The weight of their regard pressed down like gravity from a neutron star.
Adrian Cole.
War Master Doran's voice silenced the crowd instantly.
You stand before us claiming rights under the covenant of ours. You have proven physical courage against young Thale. But the covenant demands more than courage. It demands wisdom, vision, and the ability to bridge impossibilities. How do you answer? Adrian stepped forward, feeling the watch pulse in his pocket. For a moment, the visions came fast and overlapping himself, speaking with passion, with logic, with humor. 1,000 approaches, 1,000 possible futures. He pushed them aside and spoke from instinct instead. I answer with a question, he said, his voice carrying through the hall's acoustics. Why are the Solivar dying?
A ripple of offense went through the soul of our contingent. Several hands moved to weapons before Doran raised one finger, commanding stillness. "You dare," General Thren began. "I dare because the Covenant dares," Adrian interrupted, drawing gasps from the crowd. 300 years ago, my ancestor saved Caney the Elder. He could have asked for anything: wealth, power, territory. Instead, he asked for time. Time for what? Not for humanity, to become like you, but for both our species to become something neither could achieve alone. He pulled out the watch, holding it high so the cameras could see it clearly. This device doesn't just tell time, it shows possibilities. And every future where the Solovar thrive, every timeline where your culture survives and grows, involves change. Not abandoning your traditions, but evolving them. "Pretty words," Scholar Warrior Melek said, her tone neutral. "But we need more than philosophy. Show us how human thinking can solve Solovar problems." Adrian had expected this. He touched a control on his suit, and holographic displays sprang to life around the hall. "Your birth rates have declined 40% in the last century. Your genetic diversity has narrowed to dangerous levels. Traditional breeding programs have failed because they focus on preserving pure traits rather than encouraging adaptation." The displays showed genetic charts, population curves, predictive models. But humans solved similar problems after the water wars nearly destroyed our genetic heritage. Not through control, but through chaos. Random matching algorithms that prioritize genetic compatibility over social standing. Cultural exchanges that made every tradition available to every person. We didn't preserve our culture by keeping it pure. We preserved it by letting it evolve. "You propose randomness," Kara spoke, her twin Sela finishing the thought, abandoning the careful cultivation of bloodlines. "I propose choice." Adrian's voice grew stronger. "The Covenant itself is proof. Caney didn't choose my ancestor because of his bloodline or his strength. He chose him because Marcus Trent did something unexpected. He put another's life above his own gain. That's what the Solovar have lost. Not strength, but the ability to surprise yourselves." War Master Doran leaned forward. "And you believe humans can return this to us?" "Not return. Share." Adrian gestured to Sarai. "Lady Sarai creates art that captures combat in crystal. She's already synthesis, already proof that warrior and artist can coexist. How many others like her have been forced to choose one, nature over another? How many innovations have you lost to tradition?" He was warming to his theme now. The diplomat in him finally finding its voice. "Humans are chaotic, yes. We're merchants and warriors, artists and engineers, often in the same person. We argue with ourselves, contradict our own beliefs, change our minds. And that's exactly what you need. Not to become human, but to remember that strength comes in many forms. Including deception." Varroc's voice cut through the hall. The Purity faction leader stood in the gallery, his presence turning heads. "Show them what else the watch revealed. Human. Show them the price of your synthesis." Adrian's blood ran cold. He'd wondered when Varroc would make his move. "Oh yes," Varroc continued, descending toward the council floor. "I've done my research. The Timekeeper's records are quite thorough. Tell them what happened to Marcus Trent after the Covenant was signed. Tell them why he really asked for time." The watch pulsed urgently, showing Adrian flashes of records he'd never seen. Histories buried in quantum archives. His ancestor's face, scarred and desperate. A betrayal, a loss, a reason for everything. "Marcus Trent," Adrian said slowly, "lost his family to a Solovar raid before he saved Cain. His wife, his children, killed in a territorial dispute." Gasps echoed through the hall. Even Sarai looked shocked. "He had every reason to seek revenge," Adrian continued. "The Covenant could have been his weapon. Generations of planning to destroy the Solovar from within. Is that what you expected me to say? Varroc." The general's smile was predatory. The truth speaks for itself. Yes, it does. Adrian squared his shoulders. Marcus Trent lost everything to violence. He could have perpetuated that cycle, used the Covenant for revenge. Instead, he chose hope. He asked for time because he believed that given enough chances, both species could learn to see past their fears. He turned his grief into grace. The watch grew warm in his hand. And suddenly, Adrian understood something fundamental. That's what humans offer. Not perfection, but the choice to be better than our worst impulses. Marcus didn't forgive the Solivar for his family's death, but he chose to believe his descendants might live in a galaxy where such deaths were history, not future. Weakness, Varrock spat. Capitulation disguised as wisdom. Strength, Sarai countered, stepping beside Adrian. The strength to break cycles instead of perpetuating them. The courage to choose synthesis over supremacy. She addressed the council directly. I've spent days with this human. He's shown me innovations our greatest scientists missed, approaches our strategists never considered. Not because humans are superior, but because they think differently. Isn't that diversity worth preserving? The twins exchanged glances, conducting one of their silent conversations. General Thren studied Adrian with new interest, but it was scholar warrior Melex who spoke. You speak of choice and chaos, but the Covenant binds through prophecy. How do you reconcile free will with destiny? Adrian felt the watch pulse again, showing him 1,000 answers. But one rang truer than the rest. I don't. Prophecy and choice aren't opposites. They're dance partners. The watch shows possibilities. But every vision requires decisions to make it real. The Covenant creates opportunity. What we do with it, that's where choice lives. He turned to address the entire hall, human and alien alike. Yes, I'm bound by an agreement made before I was born. Yes, forces beyond my control brought me here. But I choose to see that as possibility, not prison. I choose to believe that what started as my ancestors' grief can become our species' greatest collaboration. Pretty speech. War Master Doran stood, his ancient frame still commanding respect. But the Council requires proof, not words. The final test remains. Adrian had known this was coming. Every account of Solivar trials mentioned a final challenge, unique to each situation. Name it. Combat you've proven, wisdom you've shown. But can you lead? Doran gestured, and the hall's configuration shifted, revealing a tactical display. This is the Corvin scenario, a real battle from our history, where traditional Solivar tactics led to devastating losses. Using human thinking, show us how you would have changed the outcome. Adrian studied the display, his mind racing. It showed a Solivar fleet surrounded by enemies, outnumbered 3-1. The historical record showed they'd fought with typical honor and courage, destroying many enemies, but ultimately being overwhelmed. The watch pulsed, offering visions of various tactical approaches. But Adrian pushed them aside, looking for something deeper. What would a human commander do differently? May I? He gestured to the display controls. At Doran's nod, he began rearranging pieces. The Solivar fought as warriors, seeking glorious battle, but humans would have fought as survivors, seeking victory through any means. He highlighted the enemy positions. Your enemies expected traditional tactics, so they positioned themselves accordingly. But what if instead of meeting strength with strength? His fingers flew over the controls, ships scattering in apparent retreat. You use their expectations against them. Cowardice, someone muttered from the gallery. Misdirection, Adrian corrected. Make them think you're fleeing. Draw them into pursuit formations. Then, he triggered hidden minds, previously dismissed as too dishonorable to use. Hit them when they're overextended. Use their aggression against them. But he wasn't done. Meanwhile, your fleeing ships aren't running randomly. They're broadcasting distress signals on frequencies you know are compromised, feeding false intelligence about your remaining forces. When the enemy commits to finishing you off, he showed the scattered fleet suddenly converging from multiple vectors, catching the pursuing enemy in a devastating crossfire. The historical fleet lost 70% of its forces maintaining honor, Adrian concluded. This approach would have cost maybe 20% and achieved total victory, not through superior firepower, but through superior strategy. The hall fell silent. Even Varrock looked thoughtful, though his expression remained hostile. Scholar Warrior Melex was the first to speak. You turned defeat into victory by abandoning honor. By redefining it, Adrian said carefully. Is there honor in dying needlessly, or is true honor in surviving to protect those who depend on you? Humans learned long ago that the greatest victory is the one that costs the least blood. Not from cowardice, but from valuing life over glory. The council members exchanged glances, conducting some form of silent communication Adrian couldn't interpret. The tension in the hall grew thick enough to cut. Finally, War Master Doran spoke. The council will deliberate. Adrian Cole, you have shown courage, wisdom, and unconventional thinking. Whether these qualities serve the Covenant's purpose, that remains to be seen. The formal session ended, but the crowd lingered, discussions erupting in dozens of languages. Adrian found himself surrounded by questioners, some curious, others skeptical, all wanting to understand the human who claimed an alien bride through ancient law. Through it all, Sarai stayed by his side, deflecting the more aggressive interrogators with a warrior's presence. When they finally escaped to a quiet alcove, Adrian slumped against the wall, exhaustion hitting him like gravity.
How did I do, he asked.
You challenged everything they believe about warfare, honor, and tradition. She smiled slightly. So either brilliantly or disastrously. No middle ground. Not with the War Council. They'll either embrace your vision or reject it completely. She studied him with those golden eyes. The Corvin scenario? No one's ever solved it that way before. Most who take the test try variations on traditional tactics, hoping to minimize losses while maintaining honor. You threw honor aside completely. Not completely. I redefined it. Adrian pulled out the watch, noting it had returned to showing normal time. Humans have a saying, all's fair in love and war. It means sometimes survival requires breaking rules.
And is this love or war, Adrian Cole?
The question hung between them like a quantum particle, existing in multiple states until observed. Adrian met her gaze, seeing in it reflections of possible futures, partnership and conflict, understanding and eternal mystery. Maybe it's both, he said finally. Love between individuals, war between ideas. Your people value strength through tradition. Mine value adaptation through chaos. Somewhere between those extremes lies synthesis. She completed his thought, moving closer. You know the Council isn't really judging your tactics. They're judging whether humanity can offer something worth preserving. And what do you think? She was quiet for a long moment, her hand finding his. I think Marcus Trent was right to ask for time. 300 years ago. Neither of our species was ready for this. Now, she squeezed his fingers gently. Now we might be. A chime interrupted them. Adrian's communicator showed a message from the Council they would render their decision at the next sunrise. One more night to wait, to wonder, to prepare for whatever came next. As they walked back through the station's corridors, Adrian noticed the crowds had changed. Where before there had been mockery and skepticism, now he saw curiosity and consideration. His performance before the Council, broadcast across the galaxy, had shifted something in the collective consciousness. Win or lose, Sarai observed. You've already changed things. People are talking about synthesis instead of supremacy, about evolution instead of extinction. That alone might be worth the price of admission. The price being a marriage arranged by a time-traveling watch? There are worse fates. Her smile held warmth that had nothing to do with diplomatic courtesy. Tomorrow you choose, Adrian. Whatever the council decides, the final word is yours. Will you accept the covenant fully? Adrian thought about his life before the failure, the mockery, the sense of humanity forever being on the outside. Then he thought about the last few days, the challenge, the growth, the possibility of building bridges between stars. Ask me at sunrise, he said, when all the cards are on the table. They parted at her quarters, but not before she pressed something into his hand, a small crystal, singing faintly with captured music. For luck, she said, and to remember that warriors can create beauty too. Adrian returned to his own quarters, his mind churning with everything that had happened. The watch sat on his nightstand, ticking toward dawn and decision. In 8 hours, he would know the council's verdict. In 8 hours, he would have to choose his future. He fell asleep holding the crystal, its song mixing with his dreams of impossible futures made real through improbable choices. Somewhere in those dreams, Marcus Trent smiled, his grief transformed across centuries into hope. The final sunrise was coming, bringing with it the moment when possibility would collapse into reality. Adrian Cole, failed diplomat, would have to decide whether to become something else entirely, a bridge between worlds, a symbol of synthesis, a husband to an alien warrior who made his heart race with equal parts fear and fascination. The watch ticked on, patient as time itself, waiting for choices to be made. The final sunrise arrived wrapped in conspiracy. Adrian woke to find his quarters under lockdown, Commander Walsh's voice crackling through the intercom with barely controlled fury. We have a situation, Cole. Someone sabotaged the station's defensive grid last night. We're sitting ducks if anyone decides to start shooting. Adrian was on his feet instantly, the watch pulsing urgently against his wrist, where he'd strapped it before sleeping. The Purity faction. Unknown. But whoever did it knew exactly which systems to hit. Professional work. Walsh's tone carried the weight of someone who'd seen too many operations go sideways. The War Council is demanding answers. Some are saying it's human treachery. Others blame Solovar extremists. Either way, it's a powder keg waiting for a spark. The lockdown lifted 10 minutes later, replaced by a security escort that accompanied Adrian to an emergency meeting. The conference room held a collection of the key players, Sarai, looking deadly in full combat armor, Keeper Alara, her ancient eyes seeing more than she revealed, and surprisingly, Varrock, his expression unreadable. Explain, War Master Doran commanded without preamble. Who benefits from crippling this station's defenses? Anyone who wants to prevent the Council's decision from being implemented, Adrian said, his diplomatic instincts engaging. If violence erupts here, at a neutral station, it gives every faction excuse to... The lights cut out. Emergency backups kicked in a second later, bathing everything in red. Through the viewports, Adrian could see ships moving, taking combat positions. The powder keg had found its spark. Predictable, Varrock muttered, but he was already moving toward the door, hand on his weapon. My forces are loyal. Whatever's happening, we're not part of it. Nor are mine, Sarai added, but her expression was troubled. Doran, the Council's decision can wait. Survival takes precedence. The War Master's transformation from judge to commander was instantaneous. All Solovar forces, defensive positions only. We protect the station until... An explosion rocked the structure. Adrian grabbed the table for support as the station's alarm systems screamed to life. Through the chaos, the watch showed him Flash's ships firing, but not at each other. They were firing at something approaching from deep space. Incoming vessels! Walsh's voice cut through the communication system. Unknown configuration. Unknown origin. They're not responding to any hails and they're coming in hot. Adrian reached for the watch, letting its visions flow freely. In the probability streams, he saw the approaching ships clearly sleek, predatory things that seemed to bend space around them. And riding in the lead ship, a figure he recognized from historical archives. "Pirates," he breathed. "But not just any pirates. The Quantum Reapers." The room went still. The Quantum Reapers were legend. A fleet that existed partially outside normal space-time, raiding across dimensions. They hadn't been seen in decades, assumed destroyed or lost to whatever dimension they'd originated from. "Impossible," General Thren said. "We destroyed their anchor points. Without them, they can't maintain coherence in our reality."
Unless someone gave them new ones. Adrian's mind raced through possibilities. The sabotage wasn't about starting a war between us. It was about leaving us vulnerable to outside attack. Someone hired the Reapers to attack during the council gathering, when all eyes were turned inward.
"Who?" Sarai demanded. "Who gains from this?" Before anyone could answer, the station shuddered again. The Reapers had engaged, their weapons tearing through disabled shields like tissue paper. In the distance, both human and Solivar ships were returning fire. But their shots seemed to pass through the attackers more often than not. "Phase variance," Keeper Alara observed calmly. "They're shifting between dimensional states to avoid damage. Clever and familiar." She turned those ancient eyes on Adrian. "Your watch, young human. It operates on similar principles. Does it not?" Adrian pulled out the timepiece, which was now glowing with an inner light he'd never seen before. The face showed not time, but coordinates, equations, something that made his eyes water to look at directly. "It's resonating with them," he realized. "The Watch and the Reapers. They're using the same technology, or related technology." "Then use it," Doran commanded. "If the Watch can interact with their phase variants." Another explosion, closer this time. The lights flickered, and in that stroboscopic moment, Adrian saw him, the merchant who'd given him the watch, standing in the corner of the room, as if he'd always been there. "Time's up," the merchant said, his coat still seeming to absorb light. "The audition is over. Now comes the real performance." Everyone in the room reacted at once, weapons appearing from nowhere to point at the intruder. He ignored them all, focusing on Adrian with eyes that held the depth of collapsed stars.
"Who are you?" Adrian demanded. "What is this really about?"
"I'm a merchant of possibilities. A trader in futures that might have been." The figure moved forward, weapons tracking him, but no one firing, as if held by some force. "Your ancestor made a bargain, but not just with the Solivar. He made one with us as well. The Timekeepers are not just Solivar. Adrian Cole. We are older than that. We are the ones who guard the streams of probability itself. The Reapers are a test and a consequence and an opportunity." The merchant smiled, an expression that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions. "Every future where humanity and the Solivar unite successfully requires a catalyst. Something that forces cooperation over conflict. We've provided that catalyst." "You're using us," Sarai snarled, her blade clearing its sheath. "Playing with lives for your amusement. Saving lives through necessary crisis." The merchant didn't flinch from her blade. "Without external threat, your council would have deliberated for days, weeks. Factions would have formed. Conflicts would have escalated. Small wars would become large ones. We've seen those timelines. They end in fire." Adrian felt the watch burning against his wrist, visions flooding his mind faster than he could process. Thousands of futures, branching and collapsing based on decisions made in the next moments. In some, the station fell. In others, An alliance was forged in battle that no amount of diplomacy could have achieved. The choice is still yours, the merchant continued. Use the watch to stabilize the Reaper's phase variants. Make them vulnerable. Unite your forces in common cause. Or let chaos reign, and see which timeline we all fall into. He faded like smoke, leaving only the lingering scent of possibility and the weight of impossible choices. "Can you do it?" Doran asked Adrian directly. "Can you use the watch against the Reapers?" Adrian looked at the timepiece, its face now showing what he recognized as quantum equations. "Maybe, but I'll need help. The watch shows possibilities, but I don't understand the technology enough to—" "I do." Keeper Alara stepped forward. "The Timekeeper's tools are familiar to me, but we'll need more than knowledge. We'll need someone who can interface with the station's systems, boost the signal, and someone who can coordinate our forces once the Reapers are vulnerable," Sarai added. She looked at Varrock. "Whatever our differences, we need unified command." The Purity faction leader hesitated. Generations of prejudice warring with practical necessity. Another explosion decided him. "Agreed. But this changes nothing about the Covenant." "Everything in its time," Doran said. "Adrian Cole, you asked for synthesis between our peoples. Here's your chance to prove it works. Show us human adaptability merged with Solovar strength can overcome impossible odds." They moved as one toward the station's command center. The journey a nightmare of damaged corridors and emergency lighting. Bodies lay in some passages, victims of decompression when the Reaper's weapons had breached outer sections. Adrian forced himself to keep moving, to not think about how many had died while he'd slept. The command center was organized chaos. Walsh directed damage control teams with military efficiency, while her staff tried to coordinate the defensive response. On the main screen, the battle played out in deadly beauty, phase-shifted pirate vessels dancing between dimensions, while human and Solovar ships struggled to land meaningful hits. "About time," Walsh said as they entered. "We're getting slaughtered out there. Those things appear, fire, and vanish before we can respond. It's like fighting ghosts." "Not ghosts," Adrian said, moving to the central console. "Just operating on different dimensional frequencies. Alara, I need you to translate what the watch is showing. Walsh, can you give me direct interface with the station's communication array?" "What are you planning?" "To turn the entire station into a dimensional anchor." The words came from somewhere deeper than conscious thought, as if the watch was speaking through him. "The Reapers phase shift to avoid damage, but they need reference points to navigate between dimensions. If we can broadcast a quantum signature that interferes with their navigation, they'll be forced to stay in our dimension," Alara finished, her hands moving over controls with surprising dexterity. "Brilliant. Insane, but brilliant." Story of humanity," Sarai murmured, taking position at the tactical station. "Varrock, I'm sending you fleet positions. Can your ships form up with mine for coordinated strikes?" The general's prejudice warred with tactical necessity for only a moment. "Send the data. Thren, coordinate with the human forces. We'll need overlapping fire patterns to be effective once they're solid." Adrian connected the watch to the station systems, feeling the alien technology interface with human engineering in ways that should have been impossible. The watch pulsed, its quantum signature spreading through the communication array, like infection through a body. On the screens, the Reaper ships flickered, their smooth phase shifts becoming stuttered, uncertain. "It's working," someone breathed. "Not yet," Adrian said through gritted teeth. The watch was pulling something from him, energy or will or something less definable. Through the connection, he could feel the Reaper's confusion, their anger at being dragged fully into normal space. "They're fighting it. I need more power." "Rerouting from non-essential systems," Walsh announced. "Life support in empty sections, recreational facilities. Anything they could spare fed into the communication array." The quantum signature strengthened, But it still wasn't enough. "The ships," Sarai said suddenly. "We can use our ship's communication systems to amplify the signal, create a network." "Do it," Doran commanded. Orders flew across multiple channels. Human freighters, Solivar warships, even civilian vessels linked their systems, creating an improvised network that spanned the entire battle space. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Reaper ships solidified fully into normal space, their phase-shifting advantages stripped away. Weapons that had been passing harmlessly through them suddenly found solid targets. "All forces, concentrate fire," Varrock commanded, his tactical genius overcoming any hesitation about cooperation. "Grid pattern Alpha. Don't let them re-establish phase variants." The battle transformed. Where before it had been a one-sided slaughter, now human cleverness and Solivar might combine into something neither could achieve alone. Fast human fighters harried the Reapers, forcing them into kill zones where Solivar heavy weapons waited. Freighters turned improvised bombers, using their cargo holds to deliver devastating surprises. But the Reapers weren't finished. Their lead ship, larger than the others, began to pulse with dark energy. Adrian felt it through the watch connection. They were preparing something catastrophic. A dimensional tear that would swallow the station whole. "I need to get to that ship," he said, not quite believing the words coming from his mouth. "The watch can disrupt whatever they're planning, but only at close range." "Suicide," Sarai said flatly. "Even if you reached it." "I'll reach it." He met her golden eyes. "This is what synthesis looks like. Human crazy backed by Solivar capability. Get me a ship and covering fire." For a moment, no one moved. Then, Sarai stepped forward. "My personal fighter. It's fast enough to reach the Reaper before they complete their weapon. Tough enough to survive the approach. Maybe." "You mean we," Adrian said. "I'll need a pilot who can handle combat maneuvers while I work with the watch." Her smile was fierce and beautiful. "I was hoping you'd say that." They ran for the docking bay, Varrock's voice following them over comms. "All ships, priority coverage for Lady Sarai's fighter. Clear them a path to the Reaper command vessel." The fighter was a work of art, all sleek lines and contained violence. Sarai took the pilot's seat with practiced ease, while Adrian strapped into the gunner's position. Though he'd be doing something far different than shooting. "You realize this is insane," she said as they launched into the chaos of battle. "Completely," Adrian agreed, pulling out the watch. Its face now showed something beyond time, beyond probability. It showed possibility itself, raw and undiluted. But sometimes insane is what's needed. They dove into hell. Energy beams split space around them as human, and Solivar ships fought to clear their path. Reaper vessels tried to intercept, but the Allied forces had found their rhythm. A human destroyer took a crippling hit to save them from one attacker. A Solivar cruiser rammed another, its crew sacrificing themselves to buy seconds. "Almost there," Sarai said through gritted teeth, throwing the fighter through maneuvers that should have torn it apart. "Whatever you're going to do." The Reaper command ship's weapon fired. Not at them, but at space itself. Reality tore like fabric, a growing wound that pulled at everything nearby. Ships began to slide toward it, caught in dimensional currents they couldn't fight. Adrian opened himself fully to the watch, letting its alien intelligence merge with his human intuition. He saw the weapon's quantum structure, understood its terrible purpose. The Reapers weren't just trying to destroy the station. They were trying to create a permanent rift, a wound in space-time that would make this entire sector uninhabitable. "I need you to fly us into the rift," he said. Sarai didn't hesitate. "Of course you do." She turned the fighter toward the growing tear in reality. "Any particular reason? Or just the usual human death wish?" "The rift is unstable. If I can invert the quantum signature at its center, it'll collapse. Probably. Probably. Definitely maybe." She laughed, wild and free. "You know, Adrian Cole, I'm beginning to understand what my ancestors saw in yours. Complete insanity wrapped in impossible hope. They plunged into the rift. Reality became negotiable. Adrian saw past and future blending, possibilities multiplying beyond count. Through it all, the watch anchored him, its steady pulse the only constant in a universe gone mad. At the rift's heart, he found what he was looking for, the quantum anchor that held the tear open. It was beautiful in its alien complexity, a knot of space-time that existed in 17 dimensions simultaneously. Adrian reached out through the watch, his human perspective providing something the Reapers hadn't anticipated: the ability to see simplicity within complexity. Every knot could be untied if you found the right thread to pull. He pulled. The rift convulsed, reality snapping back like a rubber band. The Reaper command ship, caught at the epicenter, simply ceased. Not destroyed, but unraveled. Its existence spread across so many dimensions that it could no longer maintain coherence in any of them. Sci-Fi fought to control their fighter, as dimensional currents tried to tear it apart. Through the viewport, Adrian could see the battle turning decisively. Deprived of their command ship and unable to phase shift, the remaining Reapers were being systematically destroyed by the Allied forces. "Hold together," Sci-Fi muttered, whether to the ship or herself. Adrian wasn't sure. Just a little longer. They burst from the collapsing rift into normal space, their fighter trailing quantum fire. Around them, the combined human and Solovar forces were mopping up the last Reaper resistance. The impossible had been achieved. Two civilizations that had barely tolerated each other an hour ago now fought as one. "Adrian," Walsh's voice crackled over comms. "Whatever you did, it worked. The Reapers are beaten. Get back to the station. The War Council is demanding your presence. Both of you." They docked in a bay filled with emergency crews and damage control teams. Adrian's legs nearly buckled as he climbed from the fighter, the effort of manipulating quantum forces having taken more from him than he'd realized. Sci-Fi steadied him, her own exhaustion showing in the tight lines around her eyes. "So," she said as they made their way back to the command center, "still planning to refuse the Covenant?" Adrian looked at the watch, its face once again showing simple, mortal time. "I think that decision's been made for us. After this, refusing would be anticlimactic," she smiled. "Though I notice you haven't actually asked my opinion about marrying an insane human who flies into dimensional rifts for fun. I assumed the laughing while diving into certain death was approval." Fair point. The command center had been transformed into an impromptu council chamber. War Master Doran stood at its heart, the other council members arrayed around him. But the atmosphere was different now. Where before there had been judgment and skepticism, Adrian felt something new: respect. "Adrian Cole," Doran began formally, "you asked us to believe in synthesis. In the heat of battle, you proved its worth. Human innovation and Solovar strength united to defeat an enemy neither could have bested alone. The Council has reached its decision." He paused, the moment stretching. Around them, humans and Solovar waited together, united by shared survival. "The Covenant stands approved. More than that, it stands validated. What began as one man's desperate hope has become two civilizations' path forward." He gestured to Keeper Alara. "The Timekeepers have prepared the necessary ceremonies. The question now is simple. Do you accept?" Adrian felt every eye in the room on him. Through the watch, he could see the branching futures this moment would create. In some, the alliance faltered, old prejudices reasserting themselves. But in others, in the brightest possibilities, he saw wonders: hybrid technologies that merged human creativity with Solovar precision, colonies where both species thrived together, children who would grow up seeing diversity as strength rather than weakness. "I need to ask something first," he said. "Lady Sci-Fi, you've been remarkably patient with having your future decided by ancient laws and quantum watches. So, let me ask properly, putting aside prophecies and covenants. Would you consider marrying a failed diplomat who apparently has a talent for dimensional rifts and terrible life choices? The room held its breath. Even the battle-hardened warriors seemed to lean in. Sarai stepped forward, her golden eyes bright with something that might have been tears or laughter. Adrian Cole, you impossible human. You've shown me that strength comes in forms I never imagined. You've made me laugh while facing death. You've proven that my people's survival lies not in pure blood, but in pure possibility. She took his hand, her grip firm and warm. Yes, I'll marry you. Not because of prophecies or politics, but because I want to see what impossible things we might accomplish together. The room erupted. Cheers in a dozen languages, weapons raised in salute, even Varrock nodding with something approaching approval. Through it all, the watch pulsed steadily, its work nearly done. Then, it's settled, Doran declared. The covenant will be fulfilled. But more than that, a new age begins. Human and Solovar. Chaos and order. Innovation and tradition. We'll face the future not as separate species, but as something new. Adrian pulled out the watch one more time, looking at its face. For just a moment, he could have sworn he saw his ancestor's face reflected there, smiling with satisfaction across the centuries. Marcus Trent's grief had become Adrian's joy. Loss transformed into love. Revenge evolved into redemption. The merchant, Adrian said suddenly. He orchestrated all of this. The Reapers, the crisis, everything. We should thank him. Keeper Alara interrupted gently. Yes, we were manipulated, but toward growth, not destruction. The timekeepers guard probability itself, ensuring the brightest futures have chances to bloom. Today, they gave us that chance. What we do with it remains our choice. As if summoned by her words, the merchant appeared one last time, standing by the main viewport. He touched his hat in salute, then spoke words that somehow everyone heard despite the distance. Time is the fire in which we burn, unless we learn to dance within the flames. Today, you danced. Tomorrow, you teach others the steps. He faded like morning mist, leaving only the faint scent of possibilities and the weight of futures yet to be written. So what happens now? Adrian asked, his arm around Sarai's waist, feeling the solid reality of her presence. Now, she said, we plan a wedding that somehow honors both human chaos and Solovar tradition, which should be interesting. Now, Doran added, we begin the real work, integration, education, building bridges between worlds that have never existed before. Now, the watch whispered, its voice fading as its purpose neared completion. The future is yours to make. The treaty world materialized through the viewport like a jewel carved from starlight and memory. Adrian stood beside Sarai on the observation deck of the Joint Fleet's flagship, watching the planet where 3 centuries ago, Marcus Trent had transformed grief into hope. Now, 3 months after the Reaper crisis, they had come to complete the circle. Nervous, Sarai asked, her hand finding his. Terrified, Adrian admitted. Fighting dimensional pirates was easier than this. This was the wedding ceremony that would formalize not just their union, but the new alliance between humanity and the Solovar. Representatives from dozens of species had come to witness it, turning what might have been a private moment into a galactic event. The watch rested heavy in Adrian's pocket. Since the battle, it had been mostly quiet, showing normal time with only occasional flickers of possibility. But, as they approached the treaty world, it had begun to pulse with renewed life, as if recognizing its birthplace. Adrian, Commander Walsh's voice came through the intercom. We have a situation. Several, actually. Of course they did. Adrian and Sarai made their way to the bridge, where they found organized chaos. The main screen showed multiple ships converging on the treaty world from different vectors. not all of them friendly. The Arcturus Coalition sent a delegation, Walsh reported. Ambassador Kresh himself, the one who laughed me out of the conference. I remember. Adrian studied the screen. Let me guess. He's here to object to the alliance. Actually, no. His message says he's here to witness humanity's evolution beyond merchantry. Walsh looked uncomfortable. There's more. We've detected quantum signatures consistent with timekeeper technology. Multiple sources. Keeper Alara, who had been standing silent at the navigation station, nodded slowly. The time of revelation approaches. All threads converge at their origin. Before Adrian could ask what that meant, another ship dropped from hyperspace. This one he recognized immediately, Varrock's flagship. The Purity faction leader had been quiet since the Reaper battle, neither supporting nor opposing the alliance. His presence here could tip the balance either way. Incoming message from General Varrock, the communications officer announced. Put him through, Sarai commanded. Varrock's scarred face filled the screen. Lady Sarai, Cole. I come not as enemy, but as witness. The battle against the Reapers showed me truths I was reluctant to accept. I request permission to attend the ceremony. Adrian exchanged glances with Sarai. And your faction will follow my lead, as they always have. Varrock paused, seeming to struggle with his next words. You fought with honor, human, different from ours, but honor nonetheless. I would see what future this creates. It was as close to an apology as they were likely to get. Permission granted, Adrian said. But any disruption, there will be none from my people. Varrock cut the connection, leaving them with one less worry and several more questions. The Treaty World's capital city had been transformed for the ceremony. Human and Solovar architectural styles blended in impossible harmony, creating structures that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. The streets were filled with representatives from across the galaxy, all come to witness history. Adrian stood in the preparation chamber, struggling with the ceremonial armor that was part of the traditional Solovar wedding attire. It was lighter than combat armor, but more complex, each piece carrying symbolic meaning he was still learning. You're doing it wrong. The merchant appeared as suddenly as always, though his coat seemed less dark, more like deep twilight than absolute void. The heart piece goes on last, not first. It represents love discovered, not love assumed. You have a lot of nerve showing up here, Adrian said, but without real heat. The past months had given him time to think about the merchant's role in everything. The Reapers could have killed thousands, but didn't. Because you prevented it. The merchant moved to help with the armor, his hands surprisingly solid. Every future requires catalysts. Adrian Cole. I simply ensure the right catalysts appear at the right moments. Are you even human, Solovar? Something else? I'm what remains of the First Alliance. The merchant's voice carried the weight of centuries. Not the public one between your species, but the secret one. The union between those who could see time's threads and those determined to weave them into better patterns. Marcus Trent wasn't just an explorer. Adrian. He was one of us. A timekeeper in all but name. Adrian absorbed this. Another piece of the puzzle clicking into place. And the watch? His creation, his masterpiece. A bridge between human intuition and quantum possibility. The merchant stepped back, the armor now correctly arranged. It chose you not because of bloodline, but because of potential. The same potential Marcus saw in the future. The reason he asked for time rather than treasure. 300 years of planning for this moment? No. 300 years of creating possibilities for this moment. The choice was always yours. The merchant moved toward the door, his form already beginning to fade. The ceremony will have surprises. Trust the watch. Trust yourself. And remember, time is a gift, not a chain. He vanished, leaving Adrian alone with his thoughts and the steady pulse of the watch. The ceremony venue was the Great Amphitheater, an ancient Solovar structure that predated their spaceflight. Open to the sky, it allowed the treaty world's 3 moons to bear witness alongside the assembled dignitaries. Adrian entered from the east, following tradition, while Sarai would come from the west. They would meet in the center, where past and future converged. The crowd was vast, a sea of faces representing civilizations Adrian had only read about. He spotted Ambassador Kresh, his crystalline form refracting the moonlight into rainbows. The Arcturus delegation sat stiffly among the others, clearly uncomfortable but present. That alone was a victory. War Master Doran stood at the center of the amphitheater, serving as officiant. The ceremony would blend human and Solovar traditions, something new created from the synthesis of both. Then Sarai appeared, and Adrian forgot about crowds and politics and the weight of history. She wore armor too, but hers was crafted from metal that seemed to hold starlight, each piece telling the story of her victories and choices. Her hair was woven with quantum crystals that cast probability shadows, showing glimpses of possible futures with every movement. She was warrior and diplomat, destroyer and creator. Everything the Alliance represented made manifest. They met at the center as planned, but Adrian barely heard Doran's opening words. The watch was pulsing urgently, showing him something impossible. The amphitheater existed in multiple timelines simultaneously. Past ceremonies, future gatherings, all overlapping in this moment. "Do you see it too?" Sarai whispered. The convergence, Keeper Alara's voice carried despite speaking softly. This place, this moment, it's a quantum nexus. All possibilities meet here. Doran continued the ceremony, speaking of unity and evolution. But Adrian's attention was split between his words and the visions the watch provided. He saw Marcus Trent standing in this same spot, not at a wedding, but at a funeral, mourning his lost family. He saw futures where children played in the amphitheater, human and Solovar together, inventing games that required both species to win. "The vows," Doran prompted, pulling Adrian back to the present. Solovar tradition demanded vows of strength, promises to defend and conquer together. Human tradition asked for love, support, and partnership. They had written something new, combining both. "Sarai Vorkani," Adrian began, his voice carrying through the amphitheater's perfect acoustics. "I vow to stand with you in battle and in peace, to meet your strength with innovation, your tradition with adaptation. I promise not to complete you, but to complement you, creating something neither of us could achieve alone." "Adrian Cole," Sarai responded, her golden eyes bright with emotion. "I vow to guard your dreams as fiercely as any territory, to find joy in your chaos and teach you beauty and discipline. I promise to face the impossible with laughter, knowing that together, impossible is just another word for opportunity." They exchanged tokens. Adrian gave her a data crystal containing Earth's music, humanity's soul, made digital. She gave him a blade forged from metal that had traveled between stars, sharp enough to cut through doubt itself. "Now," Doran said, "the final tradition, the test of truth." This was Solovar custom, at its most ancient. The couple must face a challenge together, proving their unity before the vows could be sealed. Usually, it was symbolic, a choreographed combat or puzzle. But as Doran stepped back, the air in the amphitheater changed. The merchant appeared, but not alone. With him stood figures that seemed to exist partially in multiple timelines. The original timekeepers, beings who had learned to see beyond linear time. They formed a circle around Adrian and Sarai, their presence making reality fluctuate. "The test of truth is not what you do," the merchant announced, his voice echoing across dimensions. "But what you choose. Show them. Adrian Cole. Show them what the watch has been preparing you to see." The watch burst into brilliant light. And suddenly, Adrian could see everything. Not just the ceremony, but the web of cause and effect that led to this moment. He saw his failure at Arcturus, but now understood it was necessary. Without that humiliation, he would never have been in the bar when the merchant appeared. He saw the Reaper attack, orchestrated but essential, forcing cooperation that diplomacy alone could never achieve. But more than past, he saw future. Two paths diverged from this moment, each equally possible. In one, the alliance succeeded through careful steps. Humanity and the Solivar slowly integrated, preserving their distinct cultures while sharing knowledge. It was safe, stable, and ultimately limited. They survived, but never truly thrived. In the other, they took a leap. Full integration, not just alliance. Human chaos and Solivar order didn't just cooperate but merged, creating something entirely new. It was dangerous, unpredictable, and brilliant. Some would be lost in the transformation, but what emerged would be greater than either species alone. Choose, the timekeepers spoke in unison. Show them the future you will create. Adrian looked at Sarai, seeing the same understanding in her eyes. The choice wasn't his alone. It never had been. Together, he asked. Always, she replied. They reached for the watch together, their hands touching its surface. The visions flowed between them, shared completely for the first time. Adrian felt Sarai's warrior's heart, her hidden fears about losing her people's identity. She felt his diplomat's soul, his terror of failing again on a larger stage. But beneath fear, they found hope. The same hope that had driven Marcus Trent to choose future over revenge. The same hope that had carried them through impossible battles. We choose synthesis, they said in unison. Not alliance but evolution. Not two species cooperating but one people becoming. The amphitheater erupted in light. The timekeepers' forms solidified fully into the present, revealing themselves as beings who had already walked this path. They were neither fully organic nor artificial, neither bound by time nor free from it. They were what awaited at the end of the journey Adrian and Sarai were beginning. Then receive our blessing, the merchant said, and Adrian finally understood. He wasn't just a merchant but a guardian, ensuring that each species ready for transformation found their catalyst. And our warning, the path you've chosen will face opposition. Not all will accept change, from either side. But remember, evolution is not about the survival of the strongest, but the most adaptive. The timekeepers faded, leaving only the merchant. He approached Adrian and Sarai, placing a hand on each of their shoulders. The watch has served its purpose, he said. It brought you together, showed you possibilities. But now you must create those possibilities yourselves. Adrian felt the watch's pulse slowing, its light dimming. Part of him wanted to protest, to keep this connection to something larger. But he understood. Training wheels, no matter how magical, must eventually come off. Thank you, Adrian said, for everything, even the terrifying parts. The merchant smiled, truly smiled, and for a moment looked entirely human. Thank Marcus Trent. I'm just the delivery man. He stepped back, tipping his hat. Until next time, because there's always a next time, in one timeline or another. He vanished for the final time, leaving them standing together as the crowd slowly processed what they had witnessed. Some faces showed fear, others wonder. Ambassador Kresh's crystalline form had gone completely still, refracting light in patterns that suggested deep thought. The ceremony concludes, Doran announced, his voice steady despite the extraordinary events. What was two is now one. What was separate is now joined. May the future they create surpass all our possibilities. The celebration that followed was subdued at first, guests uncertain how to react to the timekeeper's revelation. But as Adrian and Sarai moved through the crowd, speaking with representatives, sharing their vision, the mood began to shift. You truly believe this can work? Ambassador Kresh asked, his harmonic voice skeptical, but no longer dismissive. Complete integration between species so different. We've already started, Sarai pointed out. The battle against the Reapers required human and Solovar minds working as one. Our technologies are already merging, creating solutions neither could imagine alone. And it's voluntary, Adrian added. No one will be forced to change, but for those ready to evolve, to become something more. He gestured to the mingling crowd, where human and Solovar engineers were already deep in discussion about quantum drive improvements. The door is open. Varrock approached them near the end of the celebration, his warrior's bearing unchanged, but something different in his eyes. I fought this alliance because I feared the loss of Solovar purity, he said without preamble. But, watching you work together, seeing what you accomplished, perhaps purity is less important than possibility. There's room for everyone in the future we're building, Adrian said. Even those who need time to adjust. Time, Varrock almost smiled. Yes, your ancestor was wise to ask for that above all else. He performed a warrior's salute, fist to heart. You have my support, not just acceptance, but active support. The Purity faction will become the Integration faction, helping our peoples find synthesis, while honoring what makes each unique. As the celebration wound down, Adrian and Sarai found themselves alone on a balcony overlooking the city. The treaty world's 3 moons hung like promises in the sky, their light turning everything to silver and shadow. So, Sarai said, leaning against him, we're married. We've changed the course of galactic civilization, and apparently, we're going to evolve into beings of pure possibility. Just another Thursday. Adrian laughed, feeling lighter than he had in years. Just wait until you see what I have planned for Friday. The watch, quiet now but still warm against his chest, chimed once, not announcing anything, just marking the moment. A new second in a new future, full of infinite possibility. Any regrets? Sarai asked. Adrian thought about his life before the failure, the mockery, the sense of being forever on the outside. Then he looked at what surrounded him, a wife who made him stronger, allies who had been enemies, a future bright with unprecedented possibilities. None, he said. For the first time in my life, I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. Good. She kissed him, a gesture that meant something different in Solovar culture than human, but perfect in its synthesis. Because tomorrow, the real work begins. Integration committees, cultural exchange programs, probably a few dozen crises we can't even imagine yet. Wouldn't have it any other way. They stood together, watching the city below, where 2 civilizations were becoming one celebration at a time. Children were playing in the streets, human and Solovar together, inventing games that would have been impossible a year ago. Their laughter carried on the night wind, the sound of evolution in progress. The watch gave one final pulse. So faint Adrian almost missed it. But with it came a vision, clearer than any before. Not of the near future, but of distant time, centuries hence. A civilization that spanned galaxies, beings who danced between dimensions as easily as walking, who had turned diversity into their greatest strength. And at the heart of it all, in a museum dedicated to beginnings, sat a simple pocket watch. A placard beneath it read, "The timepiece of synthesis." When humanity and the Solovar were separate, this device brought them together. It showed them that time was not a river flowing in one direction, but an ocean of possibilities waiting to be explored. The vision faded, but the hope it brought remained. Adrian pulled out the watch one last time, running his fingers over its familiar surface. Tomorrow, it would go to that museum, its active role complete. But tonight, it was still his, still connecting him to Marcus Trent and all the choices that led to this moment. Thank you, he whispered to it, to his ancestor, to the merchant, to chance itself. The watch's face showed midnight, though the hour was nowhere near. But Adrian understood. It wasn't showing the time. It was showing the moment when everything changed. When a failed diplomat met a mysterious merchant. When impossible became inevitable. When love transcended species and grief became grace. Adrian, Sarai's voice brought him back to the present. "What is it?" He showed her the watch's face, frozen at midnight. "The moment we began," he said. "And look." He turned the watch over, where new words had appeared beside the original inscription. "Time was the fire in which we burned, until we learned to dance within the flames. Now we teach others the steps." She smiled, understanding perfectly. From fire to dance to teaching, the cycle completes and begins again. In the distance, music started. Human jazz, mixing with Solovar battle hymns, creating something that should have been cacophony, but instead found unexpected harmony. People were dancing, moving to rhythms that belonged to no one culture, but to the new one being born. "Shall we?" Adrian asked, offering his hand. "Lead the way, husband," Sarai replied. "Let's show them how it's done." They descended to join the celebration, leaving the watch on the balcony where moonlight could kiss its face. Its work was finished, its purpose fulfilled. Marcus Trent's desperate hope had become Adrian and Sarai's living reality. Behind them, the watch ticked one last time and fell silent. But in that silence was satisfaction, completion, and the quiet certainty that time, properly used, could heal any wound and bridge any gap. The future was no longer the watch's to tell. It was theirs to make. And they would make it extraordinary,